No
So
problem.
this happened, this topic came out because in many of our entrepreneurship classes, we will tell students, hey, just use LinkedIn. It's a great way to connect with people. And and it is, but not everyone knows how to use LinkedIn. So this is real quick how to get started on LinkedIn really quick because there's tutorials online. And then some of the specific things you can use to do customer discovery. So I'm going to do just a couple things here. I want to say, first of all, that we do customer discovery because most of us have an idea, and an idea is not enough. So just having an idea, lots of people do that. But just because I have an idea and my husband thinks it's a good idea and my next door neighbor thinks it's a good idea, that doesn't mean that it's a business. It might actually just be a hobby. It might just be a passion project for me. And there's risks with being an entrepreneur. It is risky business. And so starting a startup or building a new business, what we want to do is think of it as this temporary state of being. We're going to get a group of people together and we're going to form a team and we're going to do some research to figure out, is there a business here? And if there is, can it be profitable? And can it grow over time? And is it something that could grow and we could either expand it to new territories? Could we franchise it out or whatever? So the reason why most startups fail, and most of them do fail, over 90% fail. The reason why most of them fail is because they start to build on something before they actually have a good, strong business model. And the reason why they fail, like really specifically, is because they're often building something that nobody wants. They're building something, I could build something, and I've actually done this, thinking this is a great idea, this is what the world needs, but until you do the research and actually ask people what they want, what they need, what they're willing to pay money for, you can't really be sure. So all of this that we're going to talk about today really hangs on this model called the business model canvas. And I know that students in the Create X program are familiar with it. The folks from ICOR Puerto Rico who are on the call are familiar with it. Our friends from Venture Lab know business model canvas. I know Blanca is on the phone and my friend Anita. And I've talked with you before about the business model canvas. If this is unfamiliar to you, then just Google business model canvas when we're done and watch. There's a couple 2-minute videos that kind of tell you what the business model canvas is. Really what we're going to focus on today is customer segments, which is all the way at the right. And we'll be focusing on value propositions, which is the rectangle in the middle. So when COVID hit, for me, it was March 16th. I went to work on that Monday, and at noon, we got together in a socially distanced room and said, all right, so everyone needs to work from home. And some of the startups that I was working with at that time, I think kind of did this, like, oh, good, that means I don't have to do customer discovery. But I had a really different point of view on this. This is a great time to do customer discovery because you can reach out to people, you schedule 15, 20, 30 minutes by phone or by video. Really, by video is ideal. And lots of people are willing to talk. So that's what I want to talk about now is how do you find the people to talk to, and how do you figure out what you want to ask them about? So let's see here. I want to give you some goals. So if you're doing a customer discovery program, like you're just getting started, here's what we know about customer discovery. It takes 20 interviews to really get good at doing an interview, which is a real pain in the neck, right? You have to do 20 just to learn how to be good at it. But that's what my experience shows over the past 8 years of being around all of this stuff. And at 60 interviews, you start to have enough data that you can start to see patterns. This is important, but I have a few other numbers for you, and that is, if you're going to do a business to business, then you should talk to at least 100 people. But if you're going to be doing something for consumers, like a consumer service, a consumer packaged product, something that would sell at retail, you should really talk to 200 customers. And these numbers are what's recommended by Steve Blank, who's really the founder of all of this. I was lucky enough to be Steve Blank's teaching assistant, and that's where I learned a lot of this, sort of the nitty-gritty of how it works, but also why it works and what the numbers are. So you'd think that it would be fun talking to people about your idea, but that's really not how it works out. So what happens is that you start talking with people and asking them questions, and if they're telling you the truth, you're probably going to have some disappointments. And I want to give a shout out to Gloria Steinem, who's really focused on the truth. So seeking the truth, what that means here is talking to strangers. Because if you talk to your family and your friends and your neighbors, and if they're like my family, friends, and neighbors, they're just going to say nice things to you and say, oh, that sounds really interesting. Yeah, you should do that. And they're not going to tell me the truth because they don't want to hurt my feelings. What we need to do is talk to people where we don't have a relationship and where we're not revealing that this is my idea. We need to talk to a bunch of strangers and really talk about what they need and what they want. So this is why LinkedIn is so important. It's because LinkedIn is a database of absolute strangers. Even if you have 2,000 or 3,000 connections on LinkedIn, which seems to me like a big number, that's still only the smallest fraction of what's on LinkedIn. And when people join LinkedIn, what they're really saying is, I'm open to connecting with people. I'm open to having conversations with people. So there we go. Let's start with your summary and how you present yourself on LinkedIn. It's really tempting to put in the top, like either under the headline or in the summary, something about what you're doing, to say, I'm developing this kind of a thing to do this kind of a thing, I'm launching, I'm building this app, or I make this kind of a product. But if you're doing customer discovery, we really need you to neutralize. We need you to neutralize your LinkedIn summary. And what I'd like you to do instead is talk about a problem that you're solving. So in this case, instead of saying, I'm developing this kind of a thing to do this kind of a thing, change it to, I'm exploring the problems faced by this kind of a customer. And keep it very open, because what happens when you're reaching out to people on LinkedIn is the first thing they'll do is click and look at your profile. And you don't want them to see what your idea is. You don't want that. You want to show that you are in research mode and you're kind of looking for what the right answers are. Now, if you are in an entrepreneurship class, like our friends at Savannah State are, you should list that. If you are in one of GSU's programs, meaning the Main Street Entrepreneurship Seed Fund, if you are a member of GSU Launch, if you have an internship with someone where you're working on a new project, if you're in Puerto Rico's I-Corps program, if you are in one of the CJ Walker programs in Atlanta, then you should list that. You should put in your profile that you're working on something that's a side hustle, a startup, a new business, whatever it is. You can hint at it, particularly if you're in one of those related programs. But we don't want a lot of details, because we don't want, when you call the dairy farmer, for them to say, Bluetooth is a bad idea. No, what we want them to say is, yeah, I'm an American dairy farmer, and I need to track my cows to see if they're healthy or whatever. You want that kind of a response. So once you've got your own profile squared away, now it's the time to start searching for strangers. All right. So the first thing I want to do is look for groups. And on LinkedIn, I did a search for Power Grid because that was one of the startups I worked with in Puerto Rico. So Power Grid in the search function, and groups, you see you have to select groups, and I have 469 results. Now, if I look down at these first three, the first one is about secure the power grid in the United States and vulnerabilities. That sounds like something interesting, and there's over 1,400 members. So that's a group that an entrepreneur on that topic could join that group and just join and just start to observe and see what the conversations are, and then start to reach out to people and ask for customer discovery interviews. The second one looks like power systems are going through a paradigm change. Yeah, there's something there, 982 members. But you know what I noticed is that there's not a photo or a logo attached with that one. So I'd want to just join it and see, is it active? You know, what's going on with that? And then the third one is actually an engineering firm. And I know that because just from the description, but also because they've got LLC in the description. So here's three groups. The first one looks the most interesting to me. The second one also. The third one I might not do anything with. You join the group, and then I think join the group for 2 or 3 days and just kind of watch. Is it an active group where people are posting things and there's questions and articles and all of that? Or is it like no activity? You kind of want to understand that. You can post something in a group and say, hi, my name is, I'm part of this kind of a program. And that's where you say, you know, I'm taking an entrepreneurship class at Savannah State, or you say I'm part of the I-Corps Puerto Rico program or whatever. Introduce yourself that way. And you can say, I'd like to ask questions about, and then you give that big topic. You don't say that you're in a startup. You don't say that you're working on a business plan. None of that. Just ask, right? Just ask generally. I'd like to talk to a few people about this kind of a problem and ask questions about the problem you're trying to solve. And would anyone be available? You can just make that as a general post. And you may not get any response. It really depends upon the group that you're in. You may get one response, but that's okay. All right, I'm going to go back to the chat. So there's a question here. How open are strangers to talking to you on LinkedIn? So it varies, right? Because all humans are different. But generally, you know, LinkedIn, if you get on LinkedIn, it's because you're saying, I'm open to networking. I'm okay to talk with people about business topics. So if you're respectful and you just say, hey, I wonder if I could ask you a few questions, I think that's a pretty good start. Not everyone that you reach out to will respond. Not everyone that you reach out to will respond. And here's a great question. How do you overcome the fear of reaching out to strangers on LinkedIn? So this is very real. And I can say, for me, it's much easier to do it on LinkedIn than it is in person. Sometimes I actually feel really nervous when I have to approach a stranger face to face. And for me, LinkedIn is much easier. So with LinkedIn, there's a couple things that might happen. They might say, yeah, I'm happy to talk with you. They might say, no, I don't have time, not interested, whatever, which is fine. Lots of people are busy. They might say, hey, leave me alone, but that's really unlikely. Let's see, I have a comment from, I think it's Elle McCrae, but my print is really tiny. It says, I've actually found that people are surprisingly open to interacting on LinkedIn. That's been my experience too. And I get requests from people all the time. I do ignore some of them, and I'll tell you more about that later. But for the most part, if people ask me a question on LinkedIn, I'll give them a response. I'll say, sure, I'm happy to talk with you, or I'll say, I don't really know anything about that, but try this person over here. You know, I'll just make a recommendation. I do understand the fear. I think maybe just try it once and see what happens. Take a small step. And I'll say it again, part of why I like this is because for me, customer discovery in person is really, really hard. A lot of the folks who teach customer discovery will tell their students, just go to Starbucks and stand in line. That is absolutely horrifying to me, that I would just walk up to strangers in Starbucks and start talking to them. So I think if you can just start small, reach out to a few people, then that's the way to begin. Now, Victoria wrote, how do you respond to someone who is negative or rude to your post or through the interaction? So that's never happened to me. But if it did happen, I think I would just respond with a, sorry to bother you, my apologies, and then I would let it go. Just let it go. I've never had anyone be rude to me on LinkedIn, though. I have had one person be rude to me on Facebook. Okay, all right, so groups is the first one. These are great questions. Keep them coming. Groups is the first one. The next one is LinkedIn, just reaching out to people. Just reaching out to people. So what I did here is I typed in Power Grid again, because this was the Puerto Rico startup that I was trying to search for. And I'm going to look under connections, people who are first and second degree connections, because that's where I'm going to find it easiest to connect with people. And so because I am who I am and I teach a lot, and so I'm connected to a lot of students and people that I've met through webinars like this, I got about 6,100 results, which is way, way too many people for me to even try to think about reaching out to. So the next step here is to narrow my search. And so this is what it might look like. I might say, okay, first and second degree connections, that's great. That's the people where I have the closest connections, right? And then I might say just in Atlanta. I'm going to narrow it down just to the utilities industry because it's Power Grid. And because I work at Georgia Tech, it might be easy for me to reach out to people who went to school at Georgia Tech. So I've already got something there that I can make a request, that I can start the conversation with. Hey, I work at Georgia Tech. I see that you graduated from Georgia Tech. I wonder if I could have 15 minutes of your time, kind of thing. And I do have some tips on how to ask specifically for the interview. So we'll do that in a moment too. Okay, so when I do that, when I narrow it down to just these specific things, these specific characteristics, then I get 47 results. I was having a hard time advancing my slide. 47 results is really manageable. Having a big number is too overwhelming, but 47, I could look at 47, look at them one by one and see, who is this person? Does it look like they have the kind of experience? Do they have the right kind of buzzwords in their profile? So that's really manageable. Now, with LinkedIn, people's privacy settings determine whether you can reach out to them or not. And sometimes you'll try to reach out to someone and it'll say, oh, you have to have a premium account for that. And no, we're not going to talk about premium accounts. We're going to figure out some workarounds today. So anytime it says you need to upgrade to be able to do this, or you're only, for $9.99 you can do this or that. Nope. All right, so here's the workarounds. If you have the person's name and the company that they work for, and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to drop these like this. I'm going to put these in the chat so it's easy for you to check out the links. Email Hunter and voilanorbert.com and emailchecker.net. With all three of these, if you have some of the information, it will help you figure out the correct email. So if you're not connected with a person on LinkedIn, they're a second or a third degree connection, then it's not as easy to get their email address. But with these three tools, and they're all freemium, they all have, I think, a limit of you can do up to 50 searches a month for free. that's how you should be able to get the person's email so that you can reach out to them either through LinkedIn or you can send them an email, either way. So it's a mixed bag. Some people are active on LinkedIn and they check it once a week or twice a week or more. And so if you send a note to someone through LinkedIn, they'll actually respond to you. But some people they don't use LinkedIn very often. Just like some of your friends use Snapchat or Facebook or Insta or whatever, and some don't. So what you'll probably want to do is reach out through LinkedIn and then grab the email using one of these three tools, and then send an email directly to them as well. You can do both. And I've got some tips on that in a moment as well. So let's see. I think you're going to want to keep track of who you're reaching out to. So this is a really simple spreadsheet. First name, last name, email address, the company, and the position. I mean, that's really simple. That just helps you keep track. And this is really focused on a business-to-business thing, right? And this is all made up information, by the way. This is all scrambled, so I wouldn't invade anyone's privacy. So just doing this would help me keep track of who am I reaching out to, or who should I be reaching out to. And then I'll show you in a minute how I would track when I'm actually talking to people. Okay, so you've got this list, and then what's next? So I've got this PDF, and I'll ask Risha to share this with everyone when we're done. This is 9 word-for-word scripts for getting in touch with busy people, and it's by Ramit Sethi. And this is something he wrote, I think it's been 10 years ago. And I've got just a couple of screenshots. It's not specific to LinkedIn or customer discovery. It's really, he's writing this to reach out to people really for informational interviews. So it's close enough to what we're doing. And I mean, the way he's written this is really good. So he says, always specify a short time period. A busy person is less likely to object to a minimal time commitment to a total stranger. And he says, give 3 choices. I love this word for word script. This makes it so easy. And you'll adapt it to your own thing, to your own voice and how you want to express these ideas. But I just love how clean and simple, and he's explaining why. Why do we do it that way? So I say send 3 email requests, either email or LinkedIn. 3 over 30 days, you can follow up 2 times. After that, maybe you're becoming a little bit of a pest. But if you just send 1 email and then you never follow up, you know how it is. You get busy. We all get busy. So just sending 1 is not enough. So you find the person you want to talk to, you write them the note, you send it once, and then you wait 7 to 10 days. And I actually put reminders on my calendar for things like this. Or if I were keeping a spreadsheet, then I would put on there, emailed on 10/6/2020, and a note. I just saw a great comment in the chat. The money is in the follow-up. It absolutely is. Follow-up is the greatest competitive advantage, and it costs nothing, right? So I would keep track on my spreadsheet so that I would know, when do I need to follow up with this person? And some people are not going to follow up with you. Oh, thank you. Oh, I think it's Tanya Irvin just posted. That's exactly what I wanted. That's the PDF. Thank you so much. Okay, so I have heard, I actually was just sharing this with a colleague in Canada and shared this slide with him, and he said, yeah, that's how Canadians can identify an American, is because that they're, sometimes more socially aggressive. So culturally, in some parts of the world or in some parts of our communities, Doing this much follow-up would be a little too persistent. So kind of listen for the cues. Look at the big picture of who you're reaching out to and the kind of responses you're getting. And if you get a lot of pushback, then hit me up on LinkedIn and let's talk about it, because I want to know what's going on and I want to understand what the difference is. Generally speaking, business community, asking 3 times is not a problem, because this is not the same as asking someone out on a date. If you ask someone out on a date and they say no, flat out no, or they ignore you, that's a social signal in a social setting. But this is in a business setting, and it's okay when they've ignored you to ask a second and a third time. After 3 times, let it go, move on to the next person on your list. Because you still need to just be doing the customer discovery, not just chasing down people who are non-responsive. Okay, so you've got a call scheduled. This is great, right? This is where I actually get nervous. So prep for the call. Who am I talking to? You know, have all your data there. And like I've got my example here. Scheduled for this time. Here's my notes. And what I really want to do in this call is I want to figure out how big of a problem this is for her. The problem that I'm solving with my project, with my startup. How big of a problem is this? Okay. So I want to pause for a moment and go off on a different tangent, because some of you are working on businesses or startups where you make something that's not a problem solver. You make jewelry or candy or something fabulous and wonderful, right? So not everything is an aspirin, right, that solves a headache. Some things are a candy and people buy them because they're wonderful. In that case, you're not asking questions about the problems to be solved, but you're asking more about how do people make the decision to buy something fabulous. And it could be, where do you go to look for those kinds of things? How do you make the decision to buy? How often? How much money do you spend? Those would be slightly different questions, but there's still a ton of things that you can learn. Okay, so time to do the interview. Let me take a sip of my tea. Excuse me. So ideally, you go 2 together, right? You're on a phone call or you're doing blue jeans or whatever. And it should be you and a team working together to interview this person. And you say, thank you so much for your time. I've invited my friend or teammate or whatever to help me. And this person is going to take notes so I can really listen to what you're saying. So this is cracking the code on how you do customer discovery. You always go 2 together to do an interview. One person is just focused on listening, and then the other person really doesn't say much unless they need to clarify something. They're just taking notes. This is cracking the code. And you have to take notes. Even if it's just you by yourself, you have to take notes, because you think you will remember, but you won't. And I'm sure of this, because if I asked you right now, tell me about your last 50 conversations, you would not be able to reconstruct your last 50 conversations. So you have to write down these notes. And here's a little sample of notes that I took on a call. So I wrote like the name and the title, the date, and I made a note that it had been rescheduled. And then what did I want to learn? This was my quick note that I wrote to myself. What to learn? How big is this problem for her? Okay. Then I just wrote in parentheses, greetings. Like we just said, hi, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. And then I started to ask about her daily life. And she said she's busy. She's usually in the office every day. And her job is the international activities. She handles all of the MOUs, the financial transactions, the pro forma invoices. And then I wrote down below, she speaks French, Italian, some Spanish, and she wants to learn Chinese, and she hates doing expense reports. So not all of that was relevant for what I was trying to learn about, but the thing is we're trying to do pattern recognition. So we're trying to capture lots and lots of details. So if I did 100 interviews and I saw that 50 of these people all wrote that they wanted to learn Chinese, I would think, huh, I wonder why that is. And then I would go back to some of them and say, hey, you mentioned that you wanted to learn Chinese. Why is that important? I would ask a couple of them and try to see, is there a pattern there? Okay, so there's a great question here. Two different people asked it. Can you record the conversation? So if you tell the person you're recording, you can. And sometimes it works beautifully. Sometimes you can say, if you don't mind, I'd like to record this because I have a hard time taking notes and paying attention at the same time. And some people will say that's fine. However, some of you are working on businesses or startups or ideas or innovations that are in some kind of a sensitive topic. And it could be related to healthcare or health problems. And then there's HIPAA regulations. There's just people's concerns about privacy. And so if you record, you may find that people are not as honest with you. They may not tell you as much. So my advice is experiment with it and try it both ways. You can try it, with Blue Jeans, or just even on your phone, you can use a voice recorder. You do have to tell people that you're recording them. You have to ask for permission. And if they say no, then you have to honor that. And that's not even legal. That's just being a decent human being, right? Do not record people secretly. That is not cool. That is not cool. Okay. So the point of taking the notes is so that after you've done 20 interviews, you pause and you read back through from the very first one to the most recent one. And you're just looking for new patterns to emerge. Like, a bunch of these people said that they want to learn Chinese. I wonder why that is. Or looking at it and you say, all of these people tell me that they generally spend $40 to $45 on gifts for their moms. Okay? You're learning something by seeing that pattern. You're learning something. It informs how you're going to build your business. So a question from Candace, is there a software you can recommend for transcribing interviews and looking for patterns in conversation? There's one, but I don't know what the price is. So there's Launchpad Central. Did I spell it right? Launchpadcentral.com. And I think they have a thing that's available for individuals. Launchpad Central is actually for schools, for teams, for programs. And then they have also an account that can be used just by one team, by an individual. But, I think if you just had, if you want to just use a notebook, that's fine. I've been working on designing a notebook and kind of trying to teach this class in a book form. I think you could do it with Google Docs. You could try and manage it with a Word document, but I think that's not as useful. I like the idea of doing it digitally because you could search for keywords. If you could pull in the transcriptions, for example, then you could go in and you could say, I want to search for every time someone says the word learning Chinese or, Chinese. Then you could go through and do that kind of search and find, and it would be easier to find. And I see someone's just put a link for transcriptions. I just got upgraded at work to Office 365, and now Microsoft Word has transcription for me at no charge, but that's new. I've only had that for maybe 2-3 weeks. And I know not everyone has Office 365. Okay, so now when you're talking with the person, what I want to hear, the questions that I want to hear coming from an interview are asking, so tell me about, and then start with the big topic. So tell me, we'll do the dairy farmer example. So tell me about the day in the life. Okay, start with that with the dairy farmer. Tell me how do you keep track of all the cows, right? How many cows do you have? How do you keep track of them? And you ask a question that has a yes no answer. And then the next question should be an open question where they, kind of fill in the blank for you. You can ask questions that have a true false if you need to clarify. You can ask multiple choice questions, but kind of vary it. If you just keep asking interview questions, sometimes it will make the person feel uncomfortable. So vary your kind of questions. And interviewing is kind of an art. And there's a couple of interviewers on NPR and CNN who I think are really good at pacing an interview and asking really good questions. So if you're interested, I think NPR, which in Atlanta is 90.1 on the radio, you can just listen to the interviews and hear the pace. So ask a question with a short answer, ask a question with a longer answer, and then ask the deep dive question. Okay, and then go back, ask a true false question so that you're varying what you're doing and just listen to what they're saying. It's great to have a list of questions prepared, but when you walk in and then they say something completely unexpected, sometimes you're going to deviate from your list. The main point really is to think about, what do you need to know? What do you need to know for your business? So try to listen to understand. And I like the idea of going, two together for an interview, so that when you finish that interview and then that person's no longer around, that you do a debrief, that you turn to your partner, your co-founder or your teammate or whatever, and you say, okay, so what did you hear? What was the most important thing that you heard? And you should both make notes, actually, but one of you is scribing during the interview, and then the other one who's asking the questions and managing the interview. When you're done and you have some time to reflect on it, go back in. What you want to track is really what surprised you the most, what had you never heard before, and what was the thing that you're hearing in every single interview that's about the same. Those are like 3 things to capture every single time. And you should be listening like you have to explain it to someone later what you heard. That's a good practice, to be an active listener. And you should be listening like your business depends upon it, because it does. This is the failure point for most startups, is that they don't listen. They don't even understand their customers at all. And we see a lot of it in Hollywood. It gets glorified that an entrepreneur has a brilliant idea and they build it, and sometimes there's struggles because that's, a great Hollywood story. But they build something and then the critics might not like it, but people do. And that's not always how startups work. It's usually a lot of work. And if you're listening to customers, then you keep revising. You keep revising what you're creating so that it fits what the market actually wants. That's the trick. So you do your first 20 interviews and then pause, go back, look at all the interviews and start to look for patterns. And one thing that's helpful is to look at what's a nice to have feature on your product and what's the must have. And also look at what people say, like the functionality or a characteristic of what they want and why it matters to them. So there was a team in Puerto Rico that was creating a small business focused on wrapping gifts. And it was in part about having access to a bunch of beautiful wrapping paper and ribbons and boxes and gift tags and all of that. But that was just about the functionality of the business. The real reason why people wanted to buy this gift wrapping service or have access to this gift wrapping supply shop is because for some people, wrapping a gift beautifully is a way of expressing love. That's a huge difference between lots of cool wrapping supplies and this is a way I can tell people I love them. Here's why I think that's important. If you open a business and what you say is, I have really cool gift wrapping supplies, that's great. That's great. And then that's what you're going to do is you're just going to offer gift wrapping supplies, right? And you'll have new gift wrapping supplies and that's great. But if you say, come to my shop because this is where you come to express love when you're giving gifts, then it's not just about the wrapping paper anymore. Then it's about people coming for something that's deeply important to them. Oh, Risha just posted a great thing, the mom test. So the mom test is how to ask questions without revealing a lot. And I don't know, Risha, if you know this, but there's videos now that the author has created on YouTube. So if you just Google the mom test, you'll see, actually, he even shows how do you approach people in a Starbucks line, which doesn't make any easier for me to think about doing it, but he makes it easier. Okay, so let me kind of wrap some of this up. So when you start your business, when I started my business, I had all of these things that I thought were true. People will want this and customers want that, and I had it all figured out. And in my own business, everything was wrong. All of my assumptions were wrong, and my business failed. So now, and this was before I knew all of this stuff with lean startup and customer discovery. So now what we talk about is think about what your assumptions are. What do you believe to be true about your business? And then test them. And if you're wrong, it's okay. You can make these small adjustments. You may remember, Eureka for this great discovery. But in customer discovery, it's not always Eureka that you figure something out. Sometimes it's this kind of, that's weird, or that's funny. And that's where you hear something and you think, that's strange. When you hear a customer say something and it kind of like a little bell goes off in your head, then you can think, oh, let me learn more about that. Because sometimes that's that one little thread that when you explore it, you realize, oh, it's not about gift wrapping. It's about expressing love with gifts.